From darkness to darkness. The eastern sky hath left, but the golden sun remained to watch over the people of the barons, and shortly after the spring equinox they are joined by the Griffin's Pride. On the far side of the wild territory are the army of the Black Wind, barbarian warriors from the sept of the same name. Last season they were drawn here by the Empire's threat to exterminate their people. They are out of position, out of supply, exposed in enemy territory. Yet they do not attack. They set up an encampment in sodden saltmarsh, and they wait. During the spring equinox, a delegation of Malum orcs came to Anvil to negotiate the release of the Black Sept. A treaty was presented to the Imperial Senate, but rejected. A second treaty, in which the orcs of the Ravine Sept offered to reach out to their former septmates in the Black Wind and persuade them to turn against the Druj, was vetoed by the throne, at the urging of Dornish senators. As the sun set on the spring equinox, the situation in the Barrens remained uncertain. An army of barbarians in the Barrens, who hate the Empire and the people of Dorne, in particular, along with 2 imperial armies. A sept of people leaving their homes in Murderdale and the Carmine Fields to go to their warriors and escape the threat of destruction. The Golden Sun stand guard, but they do not engage the Black Wind. The Griffin's Pride follow their example. The Black Wind remain where they are. A few small bands issue forth to meet their people as they arrive from the west, to usher them into the relative safety of the fens and bogs, and then north into the forest of Ulnak, into the Gulthak forest. It takes almost the entire season for the Sept of the Black Wind to cross the Barrens. Their leaders, their elders, their chiefs, their wise counsellors, were executed by the Iron Helms, and now they must feel their way as best they can. A mass of frightened people moving slowly, terrified that at any moment the Dornish knights might fall on them. Knowing what awaits them is little better than what they leave behind, that they exchange the murderous rule of imperial hegemony for the miasmic oppression of the Malum. There are no incidents. The Black Wind hate the Empire only a little more than they hate the Druj, but they love their people more. A week before the summer solstice, the last of the refugees reach Saltmarsh, and the Black Wind decamp, following their sept across the nameless river into the Malum. The fragile peace of the Barrens persists. The Ravine are still encamped around the Teeth, still in control of the Mithril, while a small number of Black Wind chose to join them, rather than risk the dubious sanctuary of the Malum. The Sept as a whole has fled their homes in the eastern Barrens. The Karas remain in the untrod groves and the bleaks, perhaps chastened by the imperial response to their slaughter of the Vendari. The great forest orcs continue to rebuild their homes in the eaves of Petar, repairing their fractured relationship with their friends in Navarre. And then, the first of the refugees begin to arrive from the south. While the Dornish armies are keeping a careful watch on the army of the Black Wind, the vigilant in Therunin notice something unsettling. Boats dredging the fever water are going missing. Only a handful, and Paragons know the lake is dangerous at the best of times. By the time people realize that it is not only boats trawling the northern banks that are vanishing, it is too late. A massive host of the Druj cross into Therunin from the Sarengrave. 7 entire armies of Malum orcs pour out of the Nezustak forest into Eastring. Hidden snake and poison crane, hunting scorpion and jagged claws, flame beetle and red lizard, and bringing up the rear, the corrupt magicians and sorcerers of the tainted basilisk. Their strategy is straightforward for the Druj: to smash the defense of Therunin as quickly and thoroughly as they possibly can. It's been a very long time since any Druj attacked the lands of the Navarre. There's been a rumour for a while, scandalous scuttlebutt, of some sort of agreement to protect Therunin and Broceliande. If there is any truth to those tales, that arrangement is very clearly no longer in place. It is always difficult to assess Druge numbers, but a conservative estimate suggests that at least 35,000 warriors, perhaps as many as 50. They are moving quickly, recklessly, striking fast and decisively at key objectives. They face immediate resistance. Eastring has some of the best defended steadings in the territory, and the Thorns maintain a vigilant watch against the marshes of the east, knowing an attack may come at any time. They fight valiantly, courageously, desperately. But they cannot stand against the force the Druge have brought to bear. Steading after steading falls, and only the sacrifice of the people of the easternmost settlements allows news of the attack to reach those in the west of the region, giving some of them a chance to escape into the Tarn Valley. The Druge do not take many prisoners in this attack. They kill as many people as they can, and while the stories coming from Eastring are confused and garbled, there is a common thread. They are not wasting time torturing the Navarre warriors. They just execute them, quickly and horribly, and move on. Very few Navarre are being taken as slaves. A horrible suspicion begins to spread that this is the Druge showing their respect for the Navarre. While the bulk of the Druge invading forces wash over the steadings, seeking to overwhelm the defenders before they can properly respond to the onslaught, the forces of the Hidden Snake and Red Lizard seize the Thimble. The vast weirwood forest falls quickly despite the best efforts of the defenders. Once they are slain, the Hidden Snake defile the corpse glades where generations of Navarre and Imperial heroes have been laid to rest, nailing the most intact cadavers to the weirwood trees alongside the bodies of thorns and lumberjacks alike. Only the great forest orcs who work the Thimble are spared. In a gruesome ceremony, those taken alive, and there are few enough of those, as many of the orcs chose to fight alongside the thorns and share their fate, are wickedly branded on the chest and belly. Kept alive by Druge medicine, each one is sent east in chains, the facility with weirwood trees a valuable commodity for the Druge attackers. As the Thimble is defiled and most of the steadings overwhelmed, the Druge forces turn their attention to East Ashes. Stretching along the shores of the Fever Water, East Ashes is a twisted maze of great mangrove trees and murky water. The Druge run afoul of some of the awful beasts that lurk along the shores of the Fever Water, but they do not pause as they press south. Word has reached the steadings here that the invasion is underway, and the Druge face further stiff resistance. Again, though, the Navarre cannot stand for long against the hammer blow of the orc forces arrayed against them. Their target is the docks at Fever Water, from which so many little boats set sail in recent years. Stealthily gathering the bounty of the lake and ferrying scouts across the dark waters into the Sarengrave. The fortified steading holds against the orcs for 4 days before succumbing. 100 or so refugees flee with stridings from southern East Ashes, making it across the border into northern Zenith, and then no more. An eerie silence settles over the region. There is real fear in Urizen that the Druge will continue to press south into Lustri. The fortification there is nowhere near completion. Yet such fears prove ungrounded, for now. Blinded Eye. As the Druge are moving in Therunin, they are also moving in Sarengrave. The last few scouts who make it across the Fever Water before the Druge seize the port bring harrowing tales of a last-minute escape. The Druge have become aware of the spy network operating in the marshes of the Malum, and they have moved decisively to destroy it. The Arrow Vipers, the cunning army of scouts and spies, has unexpectedly come down from the north, and with the support of the Druge garrison at the Tower of the Skink, launched an all-out offensive against those keeping an eye on the dismal territory. Those Navarre engaged in exploring the Malum bring horror stories of their own. Ambushes, traps, vicious fighting, knee-deep in the waters of the Sarengrave and beyond. The Druge have turned their eyes inward as well as outward, it seems. They have become aware of Imperial heroes making incursions into their lands, and moved decisively to bring an end to them. One by one, the shelters and caches in Sarengrave are identified and destroyed. One by one, the nodes in the spy network fall silent, contact with the remaining scouts lost. A few weeks before the summer solstice, the last stragglers emerge from the marshes into Lustri, and then nothing. It is assumed that those left behind have been killed, or worse, taken alive by the Druge. The shelter of the oak. The momentum of the Druge attack is beginning to ebb a little, but they are by no means done with Terunin. A month before the summer solstice, the flame beetle leads the bulk of the hunting scorpion and the jagged claws into the lower Tarn Valley, to the Holt of the Oak. Built and garrisoned by the great forest orcs, the warriors here have not been idle. They gathered their spears as soon as word reached them that the Druge were coming, and they marched out to Eastring to bolster the steadings there. They fought along the borders of East Ashes, doing their best to slow the Druge advance. As the Malum invaders crush steading after steading, more and more folk fleeing the slaughter pass beneath the shadow of the Holt, and the Orc spearfighters and the Navarre Thorns do their best to help them get to safety. Then the army comes. The garrison is already exhausted, depleted, but it fights. Sheltered by a great wall topped with living thorns from the ramparts of the majestic weirwood towers within, the orcs prepare to stop the Druge advance. They do not fight alone. As well as handfuls of battered thorns driven out of the eastern regions, a lone Navarre warband joins the orcs of the great forest on the walls. As those who were there when the Tower of the Scorpion fell well know, the flame beetle are among the most destructive forces the Druge wield. They revel in ruin, exulting in the devastation of anything that seeks to stand against their tyranny and hate. The warriors that fight beneath the banner of the flame-wreathed beetle bear burning brands even during the day, bringing agonizing burning death to all who fall into their hands. Many of these cruel orcs bear the lick of fire themselves, their skin scarred by awful burns, a corrupt badge of honor that, perhaps, serves as a twisted mirror to the graceful tattoos and brands the Navarre themselves favor. There is nothing graceful about the flame beetle. Their blind slaves, yoked like beasts, drag ramshackle siege engines and makeshift wagons through the mud, beaten and whipped when the catapults and ballistae inevitably flounder in the waters of the marsh. They reach the towers of the Holt of the Oak as the sun is setting. Through the night, the wet woodlands are alight with torches and bonfires. The flame beetle do not let a little thing like damp wood stop them. There is the sound of awful hammering and sawing, and the shouts of slaves, and the thunderous drumming of the Druge warriors. As the sun rises, the flame beetle drag out 24 captured Navarre thorns and brands, and a handful of surviving orc warriors. Their bodies are racked with signs of torture, as they are lashed to crude stakes before the siege engines, and set them alight, and their agonized screams signal the first barrage of burning missiles and barbed iron balls launched toward the fortification walls. Behind the barrage come the ladders. The Druge have not bothered with the siege towers and the fortified rams they have used in the past. The terrain here does not favor them. Instead, even as the assault against the tower continues, the Druge pour up the walls and through the living thorns that top them. The first wave are made up of lightly armored orcs with axes and even a few saws, who help clear areas of the thorns to make it easier for the rest of the warriors to overwhelm the walls. These warriors die by the dozen, but seem to withstand incredible punishment before they die. A potion master could no doubt mark the symptoms of warming armor or weakening sun on these poor fools who throw their lives away to preserve those of the Druge vanguard. The fighting on the walls spreads into the courtyard between the towers. The desperate defenders of the eastern gate are overwhelmed, the doors thrown open, and the Druge under the scorpion banners join the fray. Still, the defenders do not give in. Every minute they can hold the Druge here is another minute their families and friends have to find safety, to put another minute of distance between them and the orcs who will do worse than kill them. The end begins when the western tower finally collapses, burning rubble and debris raining down on the defenders. Then the other towers one by one begin to crumble. The wall, battered and broken by the relentless pounding of rocks and stones, cracks and breaks, and it is all over. The Halt of the Oak, a symbol of the cooperation between the orcs of the southern barons and their Navarre allies, burns. The garrison is shattered. Almost 2,000 Great Forest orcs and Navarre die in the fighting, their bodies consumed by the resultant conflagration. Tread carefully. The Battle of the Oak, the sacrifice of the defenders, is not in vain. Months of fighting have blunted the Druge advance, at least for the moment. The host of Malum orcs regroup and regathers. Warbands fan out over Eastring and East Ashes, seeking to capture or kill, to locate the remaining steadings and lay siege to them. Others move up to join the Flame Beetle camped near the ruins of the Halt of the Oak, preparing, no doubt, to sweep up the Tarn Valley toward Peak Edge Song to secure the whole of the territory. Refugees are fleeing east and north into the Barrens, where the Great Forest orcs offer sanctuary to their sept and their friends. The advance of the Druge into the lower Tarn Valley has left several of the communities, Navarre and Great Forest orc alike, cut off. Most are making preparations to try and leave, but it is uncertain if they will manage it before the Druge warbands reach them. As the summer solstice draws close, the gentle touch of spring magic begins to fall across the Runin. The tainted basilisk have been silent until now, their warriors busy supporting the armies of the Malum on conquering the east, but their gulai barely glimpsed. The waters of the marshes begin to tingle with life, with a kind of wholesomeness. At first, the folk of the western regions take the healing waters as a blessing, and in a way they are. But those who have studied the recent reports out of the Sarengrave from the scouts who explored Bintal Dol do not share their relief. And as the potent curse floods the territory with vitality and fertility, as the magic begins to take hold, the Valorn of the Runin begins to stir in its fitful slumber. Game information. The Druge have conquered Eastring and East Ashes and are 2/5 of the way toward conquering the Lower Tarn Valley. As a consequence, with Navarre only controlling Peak Edge Song, Upper Tarn Valley and Lower Tarn Valley, they have lost control of the territory. The Druge have not, however, taken control of the territory. They only control 2 of the 7 regions. The Valorn controls Sweetglade and Greenheart. The territory is thus considered contested, although the senator for Therunin loses their seat in the Senate regardless. It is no longer possible to target Therunin from Anvil using the Imperial Regio. The supply of Navarre has not been affected by the loss of Eastring and East Ashes. The Halt of the Oak has been destroyed. The Thimble and the Feverwater docks have been captured, but are currently believed to be intact. The Sarengrave spy network has been destroyed by the Druge. It will provide its final report at the summer solstice. The Druge have laid rivers of life over Therunin, the curse that brings healing, but also brings a burst of vitality and fertility that risks rousing the attention of the Valorn in Sweetglades and Greenheart. Removing the curse requires the casting of Rivers Run Red, and doing so would be a serious crime, as the ritual is interdicted by the Imperial Conclave. The Dredgemaster of Feverwater has lost access to both their ministry and their income of ingots. Likewise, the Thimble will not provide weirwood after the summer solstice, unless it is recovered. The associated titles still exist, and still have responsibilities to protect and deal with the threats to the commissions they oversee. The lone military units supporting the Halt of the Oak did not receive a share of the Imperial Guerdon. Participation, Therunin and the Malum. If your military unit undertook the Explore the Sarengrave adventure, or supported the Sarengrave spy network, You are encouraged to create stories of desperate fighting against the Arrow Viper and last-minute escapes back into Imperial territory. You will receive the normal production for the adventure as appropriate, but the Explore the Sarengrave adventure is no longer available, as the docks at Feverwater and Modlark's Haven are both in the hands of the Druge. Any Navarre character whose personal resource is in Therunin is welcome to create their own story of resistance against the Druge within the parameters above. Any character whose military unit took the Explore the Sarengrave adventure, garrisoned at the Holt of the Oak, or supported the spy network in the territory can email plot@profounddecisions.co.uk before the 19th of July with their CID to request a lingering traumatic wound in their character pack at the event representing damage sustained escaping the Malum. The Custodian of the Thimble and the Dredgemaster of Feverwater can also choose to email plot@profounddecisions.co.uk if they wish to receive a lingering wound in their character pack. Poison and Ashes. Battle Opportunity. The Druge are in the Lower Tarn Valley, and they appear committed to murdering as many Navarre and Great Forest Orcs as they can. There is an opportunity for Imperial heroes to face the Druge in Lower Tarn Valley to prevent them from murdering large numbers of Navarre and Great Forest Orcs, as well as a chance to perhaps put a stop to whatever else they are planning to do in northern Therunin.